I'm very excited today to have a good friend, Madz Deyzel, with us.
Hi.
Madz, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks, and you?
Myself and Helene, my wife, have benefited so much just from friendship with you and Den.
Thanks.
Our marriage has been impacted, and it's just wonderful to have you. So thanks for making the time.
It's great to be here.
Very excited. We're going to be talking about your latest book.
Yes.
Second book. Is that
Second
right?
book.
Second
That's
book.
correct, yeah.
What is it? What's the title, Madz?
The Mental Mindsets of Mary, Martha, and Me.
We're going to jump into it.
A whole bunch of M's.
I think one of the things I like to just unpack before we start is who listening now is this book most meant for? And what's the synopsis of the book? What's it more or less about?
So it's definitely targeted specifically to women. And one of the things I find is that often as women, we are very driven by what we do. We're very task-orientated. We kind of almost pride ourselves in our ability to multitask. And in the midst of all of that, we can often find our souls in distress. Because as women, we often struggle to find peace with who we are and therefore position our soul into a place of rest. And so the synopsis of the book is digging into the story of Mary and Martha and kind of gleaning from insights of the story, the mindsets that these two different women potentially had. And as a counselor, I've kind of always try and take liberty. So this is not really a theological book per se.
Okay.
But as a counselor, I know that behavior tells a story. So I look at the behavior of these two women and then using basic self-awareness tools, consider what was their emotion and potentially what was the mindset that drove the behavior that we can therefore glean insight out of to apply to our own lives.
So what inspired you then to write the book?
It was probably middle of last year. I was doing a women's conference at a church in PE, and I'd done it on the story of Mary and Martha, and I called it The Mental Mindset of Mary and Martha. I didn't add the me part then. And I had a bunch of women come to me afterwards, specifically an older lady who said to me, I wish I knew this information when I was younger. And I could see there was a lot of sadness in her face as she said that, because she had gleaned insights and revelations from the tools and the insights I'd shared that she was going, if I'd applied this to my soul 40 years ago, how differently my life would have played out. And so that was the original thought behind it. And I had actually gone away for a weekend by myself, which was a soul charging space with the idea of doing some writing. And I had planned to write a different book, and God said, write this one.
Oh, wow.
And so, it was just the heart of going, how do we give women handles and tools to own their mindsets, own their journeys in order for them to find freedom?
Was it surprising for you? So you go away, you've got a book in mind, you prepared.
Yeah.
And how did that experience happen for you? So did you sit down to write and then...
So it's weird because, I mean, there's always a process to book writing. And I've actually done a book writing course that gives you tools and formats. And I'd prepared for a different book. And then I literally just felt like God say, write this one. And so I literally just started writing. And the first 10,000 words came out of me in 48 hours.
Wow. While you were away?
While I'm away on the weekend. So literally the first 3/4 of the book was written in a weekend. And I kind of scribbled together an overview draft, kind of just the content pages. And then the last 2/3 of the book was literally written over a 6-day period, like a 4-day period. So in total it was 6 days that I wrote this book. And it's so weird because in the beginning people said to me like, what did you write about? And there's a part of me that actually is like, I don't know. Like something, I had to go back and read it myself to go, what did I actually write? And it honestly felt like a download. And so this wasn't a me book. This was a God book.
So very different to experience in the first.
Very different to the first one.
Okay. We'll come back to his future books.
Yeah.
This particular book then, how do you hope it's going to help women who read it? What is your hope?
So Isaiah talks about the fact that people perish because of a lack of knowledge. And as a counselor, I see that people perish because of a lack of self-awareness. They not understand why they think, feel, and behave the way they do. They're caught in destructive reaction patterns, destructive mindsets that keep producing the same cycles of dysfunction. And so my hope is that as women read this book, they'll be able to grow their own self-awareness, because the tools I give help them identify and better relate to Mary and Martha, and then in turn be able to apply that insight to themselves. And so the first chapter is digging into that, and then the last, I think it's 5 or 6 chapters, apply those insights to the different stages of womanhood. So what does it mean to be a daughter, your experience of your primary caregivers as a daughter, your siblings, friends, the status of being single, the status of being married, being a mother, and then landing in the last chapter on what does it actually mean to be a daughter of the King. So it takes women on a journey of unpacking these principles and tools into every stage of life. And already some have said, well, if I'm not married yet, should I be reading this book?
Sure.
And I'm like, absolutely, because even the chapters on marriage and motherhood can give you insights into how do I work on becoming the best version of myself even before I get married.
Brilliant.
Because often we go, well, let me get married and then I'll figure out how to be a wife.
Yes.
No, you can actually invest in those foundations before you're married.
Unlike Jerry Maguire, you complete me. No, get complete beforehand.
100%.
Because you're mentioning it, and as I looked through the book myself as a guy, is it something, if there are guys listening or watching, that they could go through as well from an understanding perspective? Is it's a great present, obviously, for the women in their lives.
Yes.
A mom, a wife, a daughter. It's directed at women, and that was specific.
Yes.
Just to check on that, can guys get value out of it, do you think?
Definitely. So I remember John and Stacey Eldridge wrote, I think it was Wild at Heart and Captivating.
Yes.
And I first read the Wild at Heart book, and for me, that gave me insights into the kind of mindsets, wrestles, and challenges that men have. And I recently reread Captivating, and there was like times where, when I first read Captivating, I wasn't married, and now I am. And I'm like, honey, read this sentence, like this captures who I am. And I think definitely if the more we have insight and understanding even to the wrestles of the different genders, I think it definitely can help. And if you're a dad and you've got a daughter,
Sure.
this is going to give you some handles of some of the tensions that maybe they may wrestle with when it comes to friendships.
Yes.
Or the status of singleness. How can you speak life into those spaces?
Well, I've got a wife and 2 daughters, so
Perfect.
3 books are coming our way. Okay, a bit personally now, Madz, for you. Why Mary and Martha, and who do you relate to?
Great question. So it's so interesting when I first considered writing this book, I actually phoned a really good friend of mine, and she immediately went into the attack of Mary and the defense of Martha, which is a very common approach. People are like, Martha, knew what it meant to serve well and was a good host, and Mary's just lazy. That's generally where people kind of go. And I realized actually the story is not about the position of servanthood versus kind of resting, because both those postures are biblical and they're equally important. It was more the posture of these women. Martha was in a state of distress that led her to almost attacking Jesus and like yelling at him. And Jesus is now with a room full of men. He's teaching, he's speaking in this kind of setting, and Martha storms in, tuning him, don't you care? Like, sort out my sister, get her into the kitchen to help me.
Sounds like my daughters.
And so it was quite almost an embarrassing dynamic that Martha placed herself in. But when our emotions get the better of us because of the stories we tell ourselves, it creates these these kind of volcanic eruptions in us. And I speak around even just ruminating conversations, and us women are good at that. We're in a tense dynamic. There's all sorts of thoughts going through our head. And when we get stuck in negative ruminating conversations, it creates this kind of this buildup of emotions, which often result in explosions. That was Martha. Mary, on the other hand, is also in a distressing dynamic because Mary had placed herself at the feet of Jesus, was a posture that disciples placed themselves in. And in the time, men were the disciples, not women. So I imagine, and this is where I use a little bit of license, I imagine there might have been a few men that was like, hey, Mary, shouldn't you be in the kitchen? Shouldn't you be in the, that's your box. But she was breaking boundaries specifically for women. And that's what drew me to the stories, that the power of Mary's mindset that caused her to hold a position that was distressing, but she never reacted once. Well, nothing's recorded of her reaction. She didn't retaliate to her sister. And I mean, I've spoken and counseled a lot of women who have had sister-sibling rivalries,
Common.
Generally, when an older sister tunes you, you're going to tune them back. Especially if it's in your own home. None of that happened, or none of that's recorded. So the hypothesis is, what was the mindset she told herself that kept her at peace despite the dynamics that she finds herself in? And as a counselor, these kind of dynamics intrigue me. The posture of our mindset, how it plays out despite circumstances. And then what can we learn? So that's what drew me to the story of Mary and Martha, is the emotional dynamics and the circumstances and the narratives and the behaviors and Jesus's response to both of them. And the insights we can glean,
And you talk about those in the book.
100%, yeah.
If you would allow us a little inch into the book specifically, you mentioned the ruminating.
Yes.
And I was talking to Helene, I think it was yesterday, about this very topic, and she's going through the book at the moment.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a bit, if you're struggling with ruminating thoughts?
Yeah.
What advice would you give us? Because I think, and you mentioned women, I think guys did as well. Just last week, I had a whole argument for half an hour, I think, with someone, on my own.
On your own.
What do we do?
Yeah. So, there's a formula I teach when I do a lot of counseling training. It's called chaos, context, conclusion. And we often find ourselves in chaos dynamics. And then we tell ourselves context stories. So Martha's in a chaos dynamic. She's in the kitchen. She's catering for who knows how many people. But I imagine that she starts running out of time and she's got a big dinner to prepare. So the context of her conversation is, I'm in here alone. And then the ruminating conversation starts to shift into, no one really cares.
Yes.
Or the story I'm telling myself is that no one really cares. And that's the thing about ruminating conversations, is that it's the story we tell ourselves about the context. If that's not grounded in factual truth, are we coming to accurate conclusions? So she's telling herself the story, my sister doesn't care, Jesus doesn't care, nobody cares, I'm by myself once again. Maybe she's got a history of telling herself no one cares. Imagine if she was orphaned young with her two younger siblings, and she's had to be the primary breadwinner and has to be self-sufficient. And so often we have theme narratives that can influence our context conversations. So if there's a wound or a trauma or an insecurity, these become those narratives that we then infiltrate into every context dynamic. Look again, nobody cares. Here I am in the kitchen all over again. Nobody cares. It reinforces those negative beliefs, which results in the conclusion, which then causes the explosion often at the end. And when I look at the formula, chaos, context, conclusion, the key tool to unlocking ruminating conversations is curiosity. If the story I'm telling myself is they don't care, I need to be curious in my mind, or even in reality, is that actually the truth? So if I ask curiosity conversation or curiosity questions, and I teach this in marriage courses, curiosity can kill conflict. Help me understand what's going on in the lounge right now as to why you're not helping me in the kitchen.
Right.
If I'm curious to what's going on in your world, I might get a more accurate context, which helps me get a more substantial conclusion in terms of
what's going on.
Yeah. You know, that
I'm not
this
just
actually
assuming.
is the truth. Because the stories we tell ourselves often are not grounded in truth. They're grounded in fears, insecurities, weaknesses. And then we react accordingly. You know.
So good.
Yeah.
Curiosity can kill conflict.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Not the cat, just conflict.
In terms of the principles you speak about in the book, you know, how do you incorporate some of that professionally or personally yourself? Is it something that you're living out and growing into yourself, or?
I think I often, when I feel emotions being triggered, in my mind, often take a step back and I go, okay, first of all, is the ruminating thought in my mind truth? Am I at peace within myself from a spiritual perspective, despite the reality dynamics I might find myself in? So that was the posture that I think Mary really grasped. I think, and I expand on this with other clues that Scripture gives us on almost the revelation Mary had of who Jesus is. You know, there were other times where Jesus came into their home and Mary poured, you know, perfume over his feet, and she acted in a way that really gave insight into the revelation she had of who Jesus was. That was way beyond her time, and even more advanced than the disciples who were close to him had. I mean, this was significant actions that she had. And so I constantly go like, do I really know Jesus in this moment? Do I know my identity, my authority, my position in him? Am I reacting out of that posture, or am I reacting out of my fallen nature posture? So am I, you know, constantly lining back to what is my truth? What is my foundation? Do I need to be reacting like this? So it just gives you a lens, or what I call hope handles, to hold on to, or frameworks to filter your own triggered moments through. And that's how I try apply it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So someone's listening, they're liking what you say, they can resonate. Where can people hear more? Where can we get the book?
Yeah.
And what forum is best? Is this something like a devotional that we go through on our own?
Yeah.
You know, do I buy it for my daughters? How would you help us?
So you can order the book direct off my website through Postnet. It is on Amazon and Kindle. It is available at Echo Coffee Shop if you're local in Joburg. But I've been encouraging women to actually buy it in groups. So if you run a small group with women, or you've got a group of close friends that you connect with on a regular basis, I have developed a workbook that goes with the book. That's almost like a devotional journaling kind of book. In the workbook is an access code to unlock the videos that are on my website. So you don't have to pay for the videos. The workbook's $20, so just to cover printing. But the goal, and already I've got a couple of friends that are running it in small groups. The goal is to almost read a chapter a week, meet as a group, and then work through the mindset that's featured in that chapter in a community of other women, where you can share stories, you can share wrestles, you can be vulnerable, you can pray for each other. Ideally, if it's multi-generational, that would be the best one.
Okay.
Because I think there's so much we can learn from other generations. And the concept's biblical. And I've received so much healing in my life where I have interacted with women of different ages. Women whose lives I can speak into, women who have spoken into my lives. And I think there is such a wealth of information in people's stories that if you process your mindset in community, I think there's two things you can gain from it. One, you realize you're not alone. And two, there is accountability and wisdom that can be gleaned from community. And we're called to do this journey in community. So I think if we can journey in that space, and for me, there's such a release that happens when women realize I'm not the only one. Who's wrestling with this.
You too.
You're also feeling that? Same here. And yeah, I mean, even with your wife this morning, we were talking about the frustrations of motherhood when your kid's throwing another temper tantrum and you're like, oh my heart, you're like, where's my peace? Jesus, help me right now. Just laughing and giggling over the frustrations and the tensions of motherhood with another mother is so liberating.
Yeah, it's good.
So yeah, that's my encouragement. Gather 4 or 5 women together, do a bulk order together to save on postage.
Brilliant.
And journey together through your mindsets.
And the website again, Madz?
It's edify-buildingthesoul.com, and you just got to click on books.
Okay,
and you
brilliant.
can order.
Madz, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. I look forward to the follow-up work. Are there more books in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be co-writing with Ash Bell, and it's going to be primarily targeted towards men.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
we'll come back and chat about that one.
For sure.
Amazing. Madz, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
God bless.
Thanks.